The challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a program called Challenge.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of faith. Nearly 60 years later, during these challenging times, we'll take a new look at our divisions, our connections, in a new program called Challenge 2.0. Last year brought the hottest month ever recorded on this planet, last July, the longest drought ever recorded over the western United States, and the heaviest rains and flooding ever recorded over the eastern United States. Now, climate researchers agree that it is a crisis demanding careful science and careful application of technology, but there's also an increasing sense that it is also a crisis of faith and values, that to successfully confront the challenges of the world outside of us, we must first successfully confront the challenges of the worlds inside of each of us. That then is the topic of this edition of Challenge 2.0. So we're pleased to welcome with us today Rabbi Olivier Ben Chaim, who is a first-time guest. He is a rabbi of Bet Aleph Meditative Synagogue in Seattle. And Olivier, thank you very much for joining us today. Pastor Dave Brown of Northwest Interfaith Amigos, the founder of Blues Vespers, and we understand he was just named the recipient of the 2022 Keeping Blues Alive Award given by the Washington Blues Society. So Dave, congratulations on that, and thanks for joining us again today. And Imam Jamal Rahman of Northwest Interfaith Amigos, and who is also at Interfaith Community Sanctuary in Seattle. And I understand you're going to be hosting a Blues Vespers service at the sanctuary coming up in June. So again, thanks to each of you for joining us today on this topic that's very central to our times right now. As I was mulling this over before we connected today, it strikes me that each of your faith traditions contains some very powerful references to either the presence of the divine in nature or the relationship of the divine with nature. Are there particular ones that really stand out for each one of you? And Jamal, I might begin with you first.
Well, first of all, Jeff, thank you so much for allowing us to be on this program, to be among these rectangles of love, as I say. The Quran has many verses glorifying nature. There's a direct verse that says there's signs or messages of God in nature. Then the Quran has 114 chapters, and a number of chapters starts with the name of an animal or an element of nature. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, "The earth is like your mother. Honor her, protect her." But the most astounding verse that I think exists in the Quran, the holy book of Muslims, is a verse that says, "The creation of the heavens and the earth is a greater matter than the creation of humanity, but people understand not. Therefore, walk softly, humbly on the earth."
Well, the rabbi and I share some foundational text in Scripture, and the text, the Hebrew Bible was Jesus's Bible, and there are some, in the opening words of Genesis, some powerful images about creation, and I'll defer to Rabbi Olivier to do that in his answer. But we need to note that the Christian household, the Christian tradition, Jesus is clearly related to the Jewish tradition. Jesus was a Jewish teacher and was shaped by Judaism and what Christians call the Old Testament, what I call the Hebrew Bible. So we need to make that connection. In the Gospels, what's remarkable is you don't have detached words. Jesus moves around the landscape and is in particular geographies for particular times of his journey. He pays attention, and the gospel writers pay attention to the land. He goes to the wilderness, where he wrestles with what it means to be Jesus, what some call the temptations of Christ. He goes to the riverside. When he was tired, he went, according to the gospel, to a distant away place. The crowds followed him, but he went someplace away from civilization. So throughout the life of Jesus and his teachings, you see him being embodied or planted in particularly geographical areas, and the geography mattered to him. And a topic we may explore later is also when Jesus teaches about caring for the least of these are most vulnerable to changes in the creation and the environment, and most dependent on the natural rhythms of nature. And maybe we'll address that later on.
And Olivier, what's your perspective on that?
Well, I would join with Brother Jamal and Dave in, first of all, thanking you for this invitation and to being here today with you. Jewish faith, Jewish tradition is replete with references to nature. There's, Judaism grew up as an agrarian society. In 2,000-3,000 years ago, the livelihood and the survival of our people was completely tied up with the ability for nature to grow the food for survival. Living in a desert kind of place, very arid and very harsh. So the Torah itself is replete with references to nature. I mean, our founding narrative is the wandering through the desert and that wilderness. There is always references to our surroundings, and for me the initial story, the foundational story for that is the story of Adam and Eve, of course, which, if you really read through those early verses, you can find that the Torah defines there's a triangular relationship between God, mankind, humanity, and earth, which are the three protagonists of the book of Genesis, really, and especially those early chapters. And the triangular relationship is really, you have God at the top, and then Adam and earth are in kind of a symbiosis relationship at the bottom. And from the start of the story of Genesis, you see that Adam is set up. Adam, actually, the word Adam itself, the root of the word in Hebrew is connected to the word Adamah, and Adamah means earth, means soil. So Adam, that humanity, the representative of humanity, Adam's purpose is to pray on behalf of the earth to God, to intercede on behalf of the earth to God for rain, so that the earth could actually fulfill her destiny in putting forth nourishment and vegetation and all that is needed to sustain life. And that's really the only role that Adam has at the very beginning, in the first verses of the story of Genesis. That the mouth, really the prayerful mouth of the earth, is what we were created to be.
Now, not only as faith leaders, but also in your individual lives, are there any experiences you've had that have underscored some of these relationships, or experiences that we have just drawn from your various scriptures, or just experiences outside of that? Anything that you'd care to share with us?
That's a great question. I've had the privilege to live for many years in the land of Israel, and one of the core traditions in our prayerful life is that there is an injunction in our practice that we are supposed to say the quintessential, most powerful words of our tradition, which is, "Listen, Israel, the eternal is our God, the eternal is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad," in the morning with the first rays of the sun. It really sets you up to pray outdoors, to be on the lookout for the first rays of the sun rising behind the horizon. And I remember having climbed Masada in the middle of the desert through the night, and arriving at the summit of Masada and finding myself in the ruins of that most ancient synagogue from 2,000 years ago, and putting on my prayer shawl and donning the tefillin, the phylacteries that Jews pray in the morning with, and just watching the sun rise over the horizon, behind the Jordan mountains in the east of Masada. And to me, that was just the most uplifting and heart-opening moment, a prayerful moment in my life. So that's the highlight of my personal relationship to this kind of practices.
I'm very grounded these days in the Celtic Christian tradition, which emphasizes experiences of the sacred, mystic experiences. I want to read a short poem by Wendell Berry and tell a very short story about that, how that happened for me. And it's called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Wendell Berry. I've had those kind of experiences where I have felt God's presence, the sacred's presence, assure me or be close to me in beautiful natural places on the island of Iona, at the Nisqually Wildlife Refuge. And once at the end of the 90s, when I was going through a massive amount of changes in my life, I did a hike to Mount Rainier's Fremont Fire Tower. I stopped, I didn't have a camera, I didn't have my little screen to take photographs and document it. And I just stopped and looked out at the massive mountain that was there so long ago. And I felt somehow the presence of God tell me, it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. The world is sacred, rest in the sacredness of the world. It will be all right. And I was empowered by that hike in creation at Mount Rainier to move forward in my life and make choices and changes that really brought me to where I am today and some of the good blessings that I've experienced today. So resting back in Wendell Berry's The Beauty of Creation set me free.
Thank you, Brother Dave. For me, a story that really has always, as I say, splashed in my heart, a story of my father. He told us that he was an average student, but when he was once, I think 8 or 9 years old, he went into a forest, spent some time in nature, and suddenly he felt this energy come over him. He became enveloped, enwrapped in this energy, and something opened up in him. And from that time on, he became a brilliant student, always at the top of his class, from that energy he derived from nature. So believe me, I have tried many times going into nature. I've done all those rituals of being open. Nothing has happened, but I still have faith. But my parents are diplomats, always living in cities. My mother loved gardens. I've always been fascinated that when you plant a seed, the intersection of earth, water, sun, air, it makes the seed grow into a tree. There's a higher intelligence that has really filled me with awe. Just astonishment made me realize there is a higher intelligence. And particularly, I might just add at the end, poetry about nature has made me connect to the divine. For example, this simple poetry about this Christian person who asked the tree, "Oh, sister almond tree, oh, sister almond tree, tell me about God." And the almond tree blossomed. And that, for me, that resonates deeply.
There are some people in each faith tradition, and those that don't adhere to any given faith tradition, who don't consider responsibility to the environment an essential part of expressing their faith or expressing their life. What is your response to that viewpoint?
My response would be twofold, especially within the Christian household. There are those who believe that the heart of Christian faith is about believing the right things about Jesus so we can go into the other world, which the consequences of that is believing that this world is important is secondary. And they also believe so dramatically in the sovereignty of God that they can't believe anything could happen in creation that isn't under God's control. So they deny climate change. Jeff, you asked about responses. In the right context, I would try to engage in respectful dialogue in the 3 cups of tea that Brother Jamal always invites people to. But when those positions are fixed, it's really hard to move them. From my perspective, I believe the way to counter those that deny the sacredness of creation or deny human responsibility for what's happening in the environment is to make sure that voices like mine and others are heard, that folks know that there are people in the Christian household who see the creation as sacred and holy, who believe that we need to care for it for the next generation. So the way of countering may not be debating, but it may be making sure that another perspective is heard in the public square. Mm-hmm. All too often, other perspectives aren't, and the loud climate change deniers are.
Mm-hmm. You know, I just want to add to that very, very briefly that I don't think this is a religious failing. This is a human failing. Mm-hmm. Because of our human nature, because of our greed, our selfishness, our apathy, we become blinded and crippled to the sacredness of nature. Not that it's not sacred, but I don't care because I am focused on accumulation of money, prestige, success, or I am, in a very short-sighted way, I am obsessively attached to what my tribe says, what my political party says, for political reasons, economic reasons. So really, it is a human failing where I'm short-sighted and the elements of selfishness, greed, and apathy come in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would absolutely second what Brother Jamal said. It's all of the above. There is a sense that we have taken refuge, if you'd like, into the intellect of humanity, that we have focused so much on what the mind produces that we have forgotten the importance of the body, and we have in fact neglected the body. We have pushed the body away. We've made the body, our physical appearance, we've made it something to be medicalized, something to be dealt with, something to be manipulated, to be basically kept quiet so that we can live our lives without worrying about it. And that attitude towards our own body has translated really to our attitude with the greater body of the natural world. And we've pushed nature. Nature has become something we needed to dominate, to control, so that it would not to plunder, to exploit for our own resources, for our own benefits. Mm-hmm. And it for me, it is in this loss of that symbiotic relationship that, in fact, our most ancient text, the Torah, asks us or reminds us to create and honor and hold as sacred. And to me, that's the why, behind that what we're seeing as the negating of the importance of nature as part of our spiritual faith.
But Jeff, I want to say something very simple and practical. I'm from Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a delta. We are in the greatest danger of climate change. Mm-hmm. Every year we are losing land. So from my own experience in Bangladesh, I can tell you, it doesn't matter what my theology is, what my politics is, what my economics is. When that is happening in front of our eyes, then these things don't matter at all, my political affiliation, etc., etc. We have climate refugees. We are losing land. Then suddenly you move from what is called from a knowledge of the tongue to a knowledge of the heart. That it becomes very real. Then you see in front of you what is happening and you realize, this is a big problem. Out here, until it hits my pocketbook, or until it falls in what is in America called falls in my backyard, until part of Florida begins to sink, we are not awakened to it because we don't feel palpably the reality of it.
We've seen elements within this conversation, but when we separate ourselves off from the mind and the body, or from ourselves and the physical environment in which we all live, what is the cost to that, to us personally and to our ability to relate to and connect and support each other? Any feelings on that?
First of all, we are all interconnected. Nature is an integral part of us. And if we just see that as a resource, as something to be exploited, we lose that sacred connection. And that's a huge loss. Secondly, I would say that nature is a great teacher. In Islamic spirituality, the mystics say that the holiest of holy books is actually nature. Anything you want to learn about life, you can learn from nature. Anything. For example, here I am doing work of interfaith. Look at nature. Like the mystics have remarked that the trees, they sway differently in the wind, but they're all connected at the roots. Whether it's interfaith or diversity, just meditating on nature as a teacher with reverence, that makes me fully understand the power, the majesty, the beauty of diversity. One more example, talking about the biggest problem in religion, here we are clerics, exclusivity. Look at nature. All the rivers flow into the ocean. Jamal, you might be following one river, but don't mistake the river for the ocean. Just this metaphor can open me up to a heartfelt understanding of my need to overcome my bias in religion. So nature is also a great teacher.
And I think when Brother Jamal, building on Brother Jamal's comment, when we live in our head and forget that we have bodies, we grow farther apart from the other people in the world, and especially people from different traditions.
It feels to me that we've spent much of the last few hundred years just multiplying boundaries and separations and dissociations, and we've seen how much we can otherize each other. And just because, to me, it's a reflection of how we have otherized God. We have made God this great other that that it seems. I remember a drawing that my kid brought home from kindergarten, where with the help of his teacher, he managed to paint on a piece of paper. We pray to God because God is no longer here, and we want God to come back. Something like that. I'm plagiarizing my 3-year-old son, but I think that's really what has happened, is that we've multiplied the otherization of everything. We've made ourselves completely isolated, further and further isolated, and we have lost the ability to see the sacred in every moment. And one of the things I love about Jewish tradition, there's a joke. If you watch Fiddler on the Roof, there's the joke that there is in Judaism, there's a blessing for everything, right? And the truth is much deeper than that. It's much deeper than just a joke. Is that in fact it's a very powerful practice of mindfulness, by which every moment and every action of each and every one of us is being offered as a blessing, as a blessing of recognition that this little piece of food that you are about to eat with gratitude is a divine manifestation. This whatever you are blessed with in your life, all of it is an avenue to see the divine within it, to see the sacred within it, to see the holy within it, and to see each other as well as sacred manifestations, holy embodiment of that which transcends and infuses at the same time everything.
There is so much more to say, and I would love for us to continue this conversation in a second version of this program. So we are going to just put this on pause, if we will, and thank all of you for participating in this. And we're going to start up this conversation again in next week's edition of Challenge 2.0. Thank you to each of you, and thank you all of you that are watching or listening to this program. And we hope you'll join us for the continuation of this program next week. Thank you very much. If you've enjoyed this program, found our conversations to be informative, entertaining, and thought-provoking, and the vision inspiring of people from different backgrounds who can disagree without being disagreeable, perhaps you might consider supporting our program with a contribution. Your support will not only help our program continue, it will also support the broader efforts of Paths to Understanding, our supporting parent nonprofit organization.